Hey, it's Dr. DeBord. I'm in my dining room today, and I have the cat in the hat painting behind me, and I'm wearing my Lincoln University t-shirt today. If we were in person, you could see that. The acoustics might be a little different because it's a different room. I hope you can still hear me. Let's see. So we're talking about memory. I'm going to make this short so that you'll watch the whole thing. Obviously, I have Dory there, or Dory. Yes, that's Dory. Yeah. Okay. So this chapter is about memory. As I wrote in the email, I wish that we could be in person to talk about this because I have a lot of demonstrations to illustrate things. So some of my slides I had written were about trying to make your memories distinct. I put this hippo here because the main part of the brain associated with the memories that are about the episodes of our life are processed by the hippocampus. And if you can associate a hippo running across campus with memory, then you'll remember that's the brain part that's associated with storing our life events. If you can make anything unusual, that's helpful. Also, I've been doing this because I've been shopping online. If you're coming up with like a list, a grocery list, and you're trying to, and you leave it at home, you're trying to remember what was on that list, odds are you're going to remember the things that were first. That's primary, the things that are primary, like primary school, those early things. You remember the first things on the list and the most recent things on the list, the last things on the list. Those are known as the primacy and recency effects in memory. Just a couple of pieces of almost disjointed information, but it's one of the facts that we know about memory. Here are some basic terms about memory. That we have encoding that occurs by trying to get it stored into our memory systems. The more visual you can make a memory, the better things are. If things are concrete and you can easily picture them, you'll remember those things much better than things that are abstract. Also, some people do better with sound. So if you have ways of creating rhymes and things like that, that can also assist in memory. So encoding is getting things into memory. Storage is like holding it there, keeping it there so it doesn't fall out and you're just not losing it. And then retrieval, now that's another thing because we can have some things stored, but not easily be able to retrieve it. I'm going to talk about retrieval cues in the next video I make. But sometimes all it takes is just a little nudge or a little reminder. If we are put back in the same situation and we'll go, oh, I remember what that was. And that's because we have cues to allow us to retrieve something. It has been stored, but it just takes the proper cue for us to be able to recall it to memory. This is the basic three-stage model of memory. I'm going to talk briefly about each stage, and I'd like you to read about these two. I put them on the study guide. Each one is associated with how much material can be stored there, and then how long it holds on to that information. These three stages are sensory memory first, then short-term memory, then long-term memory. Sensory memory is basically all the impressions coming in for our 5 major senses. And so sensory memory is huge. It can hold on to a lot of information, but it can't hold on to it for very long. So we have all this information coming into our senses, makes an impression on our sensory memory. And then if we direct our attention to something that we want from that impression, we can grab it and take it and store it into short-term memory. So sensory memory is just really about our senses. So it's called sensory. It's very, very, very short, only about a quarter of a second for visual information and about 2 to 3 seconds for things that are spoken to us. So, you know, if somebody says something to you and you say, huh, and they start to repeat it and you're like, no, I got it. That is your echoic or your auditory sensory memory, because you still have that playing in your auditory sensory memory. You just didn't realize that it was still there, so you could still go grab it. The next stage of memory, if we direct our attention to things from our sensory memory and put it into short-term memory, then we can work with that information. I always say that we use our short-term memory. This is how we do interactions with everyday life. So if right now I ask you to think of somebody that you went to 4th grade with, and you can think about that, and you can pull them up. I'm like, can you tell me what they look like, what their personality was like? So basically what I've done there is I have made an impression on your sensory memory. I said, go think of someone that you went to 4th grade with. You heard that. That made an impression on your auditory sensory memory. And then I said, go think of someone who's basically that you went to fourth grade with. You have to go back into long-term memory, and your short-term memory is grabbing that, pulls it into your short-term memory, and then you start to work with it. Short-term memory is then where you can tell me, this is what the person's personality was like, this is what they look like, this is where they lived, this is what I thought about them. Short-term memory is how we interact. We can hold about 7 pieces of information in short-term memory. And we can only hold on to it for about 30 seconds, anywhere from 2 to 30 seconds, but 30 seconds typically. If we rehearse it, and this is a process I want you to be familiar with, rehearsing things is just like rehearsing a song or rehearsing a play. You're playing it over and over and over. You can increase the amount of time we hold information in short-term memory by rehearsing it. Chunking information is trying to mash it down into just meaningful chunks of information. So if you're trying to, well, actually, I think probably one of the easiest things is, you know, the saying for the order of operations in math. So what is it? I'm trying to remember. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Yeah, that's the one. So you're crunching all that information into one meaningful unit, one meaningful phrase, and that's called chunking. You can store more information that way. Short-term memory has 2 tools. One is that we're easily can conjure up. One's a visual one, one's an auditory one again. So I want to ask you to do something right now. I want you to think about a house. I want you to close your eyes and think about a house that you spent a lot of time, or a place where you spent a lot of time growing up. Now, I want you to walk around that place and count the number of windows that were in that place. Okay. The second thing I want you to do is you can open your eyes. I want you to close your eyes again, and this time I'm going to give you a set of directions, and I want you to do as I say, please. Close your eyes. Count the number of words in this sentence. Count the number of words in this sentence. Okay, now you can open your eyes. Okay, so my question to you is, the first time, did you have to use your fingers to count? The second time, did you use your fingers to count? Typically what happens is the first time, I'm asking you to come up with a visual scene in your head, and you can go around and say, there's window 1, window 2, window 3, you can talk to yourself. But when I ask you to replay the sentence I just said, count the number of words in this sentence, your auditory tool is busy. And so you don't say count, that's 1, count that's 2 words, count the number, that's 3 words, count the number of, that's 4 words. You don't do that. You just use your fingers. Count the number of words in this sentence, 8. So we have those 2 tools that we can use in our short-term memory. The final form of memory is a long-term. We think this is vast. This picture is from Raiders of the Lost Ark, if you've ever seen that, where they just store tons and tons. And the amount of information we can hold there is just huge. And the length, it's a question mark. How long can we? It seems like almost interminably. There are subtypes here, and I've given you an assignment for this. The subtypes include our explicit memories and our implicit. The explicit are things that take effort and usually consciously talking to ourselves. The implicit are a little more automatic to happen to us. So this chart breaks it down even further. The explicit, we call this our talking memory. Excuse me. So it's also, and when you're talking, so I do declare, so declarative memory is talking, it's explicit, it's out there in the open. Those includes our episodes of our life. So if you have lived through the birth of a child, you remember your high school graduation, you remember your first kiss, all those sorts of things. Those are episodes in your life that are part of declarative or explicit memory. And we actually store those by telling ourselves our stories. We don't begin to develop, if you think about your first memory when you were a kid, it's usually right about the age range of 3. And when that happens, about the age range of 3, is when we first start talking. So that's when we can tell ourselves our stories. Another set of declarative memories are semantic memories. And those are just pieces of information we walk around knowing. Like We know who the previous president was of the United States. You say Barack Obama. So that's a piece of information. You know when your mom's birthday is. That's a piece of information. That's a semantic. You know your address. That's a semantic piece of information. You just have stored and you can recall that stuff right away. We also have implicit or non-spoken memories. So the skills memories are the easiest: tying your shoe, brushing your teeth, riding a bike, things that like are actually even hard to describe in words. You don't say you brush your teeth, okay, now you take the brush up and now you take the brush down. Now you show someone how to do that when you're showing a kid how to brush their teeth. The last one is emotional conditioning, and those are the classically conditioned memories. So let me just go back one step. The explicit memories are stored by the hippocampus or processed by the hippocampus. These implicit memories are processed by the cerebellum in the back of the brain, if you remember that part of the brain, also associated with coordination of fine motor movements. But the emotional conditioning includes, like, if you smell a perfume that reminds you of your grandma, like oh, she used to wear this rose water thing, then that is a conditioned memory. Anything, if you hear a dog bark and it makes your heart jump, that is an emotional conditioning. That's a type of memory that's kind of more reflexive and not thought about in terms of words. Okay, so I've walked through these. There's a little bit more description of what those are. I'm just going to talk about 2 more memory processes and then we'll be done for today. One is spacing versus mask practice. I know that right now with the way that we're testing for this course, it's a little different than when we took the test in the class. If you're taking a test one time and taking it at one setting, the best way to prepare for that is to space out your practice. You study a little bit, then you take a break. You study a little bit on Monday, take a break. Study a bit on Tuesday, take a break. Study a bit on, that results in a lot better retention or holding on to that information. Instead, though, what a lot of people do is masked practice, and they just cram it all into one spot, usually the night before or the morning of a test. That doesn't work very well. I have this picture here because this is a mirror drawing task where you try to draw while looking in the mirror. When kids learn to trace outlines by using space practice versus like practicing using mass practice, they do a lot better on those tasks when they space out their practice. Then this is the last thing I have for today, and that is our retrieval tests. There are 3 major ways that we can test our ability to retrieve information from memory. One is just pure recall. I mean, if you came into my class and I gave you a blank sheet of paper and say, write down everything that you remember about intro psych for the final exam, that's a recall. You don't get any cues, any tips. Recognition, you do get cues and tips, like the multiple choice tests that we take. Any sort of, like, it might be A, B, C, or D, then there's going to be cues that help you recognize which one's the right answer. So that's a test of your memory, because if you recognize the right answer, then you've got that correctly memorized. But one thing that's hard to assess is relearning. But this is a number of things that we can realize is that we've learned something that's in memory is if we relearn it faster. So if any of you ever had like a Spanish class in high school and it was kind of hard going the first round, if you end up taking a Spanish class now at Lincoln, you're probably going to, I did that. I took 2 semesters of Spanish at Lincoln just for fun. We have good teachers. What I found was that I relearned it a lot faster than I did the first time because it was already stored there. So that's a measure of learning and memory that we have. So this was 14 minutes on memory. I'll create another video on Wednesday. Thanks.